Hey, hey.
Hi.
Hey, how are you doing?
Yeah,
Good
I'm good.
morning.
How are
Testing,
you?
testing.
Yeah, we can hear you. Can you hear me, guys?
Can hear you, Ophir.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining again so late, Baktuk.
Hello, everybody.
Yeah, I'm ready. It's midnight here.
Hello.
Yeah, it's very late for you, isn't it? Dr. Killer, nice to see you on the line. I saw your note from the last day or two getting onboarded. Welcome to the CCC.
Thanks. Pleasure. Thank you. My mic is fine.
Yeah, it's great. And we will we give time for new attendees to introduce themselves after the first few slides of the meeting. So that'll be coming up. Get our slides up here in just a minute, and then we'll get going. Somebody have a count on whether we're at quorum?
Not yet.
Okay. I had a note from Dave that he's going to be on a plane. He was hoping Alec will be able to join as the backup for Microsoft. Look at what we have for pre-approvals on the minutes. Those are a little bit skinny. Let's go ahead and get going, and I'm sure we'll get a couple other voting members on as we get going. So today is Movember 2nd. Welcome everybody to the meeting of the Technical Advisory Council of Confidential Computing Consortium. If you are here, it is because you are also interested in accelerating the adoption of confidential computing, which is the protection of data in use. We abide by the Linux Foundation's antitrust policy notice, and if you want to read about that, you can go to linuxfoundation.org/antitrust-policy. We have three big topics for today. After we do our normal warm-up activities, we want to finalize our response to the Internet Architecture Board. We have Baktuk joining us at 11 p.m. for time to give a presentation on ILET. And following that, we will have a tech talk on some issues that are being looked at in the OpenSSF from Marcela Millara. That should be around 8 o'clock or so, maybe 8:30 Pacific time by the time we hit that point. And then given some time, we'll go through action items. And I doubt we're going to get to it, but we're getting near the last couple meetings of the year here, so we really need to finalize what it is we've accomplished for our priorities that we set up at the beginning of the year and finalize what we're going to do in 2024. Were there any other agenda topics that people expected for today? Any other amendments? No? Great.
Dan, if there's a minute,
yeah,
it might. I have a comment to make about the recent presidential order and its connection to confidential computing. So if there's room for that, that would be great. But I have to warn you, I have to leave at 8:30. So.
Okay. Was it in order, did you say? Is that the right word, Chris?
Executive order.
Okay. So we'll do that, let's say right after we, in fact, why don't I let you go ahead and hit that first so that we give time for the other voting members to join in.
Sure. So I think a lot of people probably have noticed that the White House issued an executive order concerning AI, and it's a follow-on to a previous sort of set of voluntary commitments by several of the major AI companies. The first announcement was interesting to confidential computing because there was a prominent comment about the importance of protecting against insider threat, which is, you know, a directly the direct use case of confidential computing in, say, private data centers. And so that I thought that was interesting. But this new one is also very interesting in that it asks the National Science Foundation in its new sort of technology innovation role to work with various agencies on privacy enhancing technologies. And there's a pointed note in there that the approaches people take are supposed to be informed by the learnings from the US-UK prize challenge in privacy enhancing technologies. And several of the members here have participated in that contest. Why that's relevant to this community is that that particular contest specifically prohibited the use of hardware-based mechanisms. And when I spoke to the organizers about that a long time ago, they said it was because they had no reasonable way to evaluate whether or not the results would be good or not. So, the minor concern is that people will interpret the guidance to base insights on that challenge in a way that ignores hardware foundations. And so we have to be a little bit careful about that and help people understand that. I don't think that was the intent, but it's a potential negative side effect of the way that contest was run and the kinds of things that they considered. So I just wanted people to be aware of that. And I circulated a statement that I was trying to draft for the Defense Innovation Board that has some comments on that, which people might find interesting. And in addition to the, as part of the comments, I came up with a set of criteria by which people should be thinking about whether or not privacy enhancing solutions are meeting their, the desired purpose or not. I would really love input on those criteria and on that statement to see if people have it. So I'll put that in the chat and would love people's comments. So thanks for the opportunity to say that, Dan.
Great. And then the thing you circulated that was on the 31st on Halloween. Is that the note?
That's correct. Yeah, that's the
Okay.
note there. Oh, did that go just to the TAC, or did that go to everybody who participates in these meetings?
It probably went to anybody who's subscribed to the TAC mailing list. So
Perfect.
that's
I'll put
a
it
nice.
in the chat here.
In fact, I already got it for you there. So
Okay, great.
for those who are new to the TAC or new to the CCC, we do have a variety of mailing lists. So if you go to the URL that you'll see in chat, you can subscribe to any and all of those. Okay, I think we've had a couple other people join, so I think we can hit roll call here. Do we have Giuseppe? I think not. Nathaniel? No. Eric Northup or Shankaran? No. Kafir? Yes. Thanks for joining, Kafir. Howard, I think I saw Howard in the list, so thanks for joining
Yeah.
again.
Okay.
Another late night, thank you. I'm here. Did we have Alec join? So I mentioned to people who had joined earlier that Dave is on a flight, but he's hoping that Alec will be able to proxy him for Microsoft. Do not see him yet though. Yash, see Yash on, thanks for joining. So is that at 3? I sort of lost count when I was talking about Dave there. 2, 3, 4. So we should be at quorum. Is that right? Take silence that I counted to 4 correctly. All right. So with that, if you are new to the community, we figure you probably have to introduce yourself twice to help people get acquainted with you. We invite you to come off of mute, and don't be shy about doing that. If 2 people talk at the same time, it sorts itself out. Let us know your name, preferred pronouns if you like, where you're joining from, and that can be what company you're joining from or physically what location you're at. Give us a little sense of what your context is, and then let us know what your interest in confidential computing is.
Hello, my name's Christian Killer. My name's not a joke, so it's actually my real name. I have a PhD in blockchain voting and applied cryptography. My background is in InfoSec mainly. And why I'm here is because I'm with Accurist Association. We're building a new layer 1 blockchain, and we focus on confidential computing in the context of a so-called zero trust execution layer, as we call it. We leverage the external coprocessor, Titan M2 mainly as of today, to build a permissionless network of computation. But we're also interested in expanding this to other execution environments that are confidential especially, and very effective, because this is one issue as of today that we can see that there's lots of redundant computation happening, especially in the blockchain space. Yeah, we're a research-driven company. We believe in open source, which is also why this consortium is very good in our point of view, and looking forward. Thanks.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us. We're excited to have you and your company on.
Hi, I'm Mariam. I'm joining from South Africa. I'm with the Linux Foundation, and we'll be joining this group as a VM resource.
Well, that's great. Nice to have you on. I think you might be our first participant from the continent of Africa too.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
Great.
Hi, my name is Sang Wang, and I work in Samsung Research. I'm a member of pilot project, which means today project introductions. Recently, I'm honored to be here, and thank you.
And did I hear you correctly that that was Samsung Research?
Yes, right.
Okay, so you're also joining quite late at night.
Yes.
Yes, thank you for making time for us.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello, everyone. Sal, they, them pronouns are great. I'm here today because I often support Linux Foundation projects with security interventions. So I'm here to learn more about security-focused projects.
Great to have you joining us, Sal. All right, anybody else who hasn't had an opportunity to introduce themselves? Okay, well, if you were having trouble getting off mute and you later want to introduce yourself, feel free to interrupt at any time. We are a community and we work first off of people and after that off of code. So I'd like to have everybody's engagement. With that, we can move into the approval of minutes. So we regularly have the minutes posted by our fantastic Linux Foundation staff. Helen lately has posted these, so everybody gets a chance to review the minutes before we approve them. We try not to do a tremendous amount of voting in the CCC. We have this ethos of minimum viable governance, but one of the things that we do formally approve is the minutes, which just entails anything that we made decisions on. So we'll review these briefly here. Last time we approved the minutes of the previous session, so that's one of the things that we typically end up voting on, and often one of the only things. Went through our action items. It's a decent sized list, so I'm not going to rehash those, but we'll come back around to some of them that were still open from last time in today's agenda. We heard follow up on the proposal to the Certifier Framework project, and then we voted to approve that. And that project will officially become a CCC project after it goes through the legal committee and the board. We moved along the response to the IAB statement, and that's on the agenda for today as well. And then we talked about the priorities that will carry into 2024. And again, time permitting, we'll visit that list again today, but otherwise we'll look to finalize that in our next session. And then we'll be carrying a flat budget from this year into next year. Maybe the only nuance there is that we're expecting more projects, but the projects didn't necessarily spend the amount that we expected them to this year. So more projects spread across the same budget. And of course, we have our islet contributors here, so we're looking forward to that. With that, are there any other material corrections that anybody sees for the minutes? And as we are still with quorum, are there any voting members of the TAC that wish to abstain or oppose the minutes as reviewed? So hearing no objections and no abstentions, the minutes are passed. And now we can move over to Ben's slide and learn about some changes that we have to our systems here. Ben, I'll let you take this.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So this is a real minor update, and I'll make this short because I know we've got a lot to do today, but I just want to let folks know that we're going to be moving this meeting to the LFX platform for meetings. It's a really minor change. It's still using Zoom. So Nothing there changes. The only thing that changes is you'll get this little pop-up when you click the link in the invite that I showed below, and it allows you to sign in with your LFX ID, or if you don't have an LFX ID, or if you don't want to sign in that way, you can just sign in as a guest, and then that's it. Then Zoom runs as normal. So the way this will work is the current meeting invite that you have will get deleted, and then you'll get a new meeting invite from LFX Meetings with the right Zoom information in it. I've moved a bunch of projects. It's pretty painless, and there's some advantages. It records meetings automatically. Those meetings show up in LFX automatically, and it makes management of attendees and things a little bit easier. So hopefully it will be painless. If anyone has any questions about this, or if anything is wonky with the invites, just reach out to me directly. I'm happy to help. And we'll be implementing this for the next TAC meeting that's happening on the 19th. So you should see some meetings being removed and then added to your calendar this week.
Okay, great. Does this have any implications for the mail lists?
It shouldn't, but if you have any concerns, we can talk about what those might be.
Just when I went to grab Chris's, the link to Chris's post, the interface looked different to me, but I had the window kind of compressed differently than normal. So just checking.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, there's no interaction with the mailing list, so we should be fine.
Okay.
But if you've got a specific concern, just let me know and I'll double check.
Okay. And it looks like you have a link in the slide, so if you want to paste that into chat for people, that would be great. And for those of you who are listening, if you don't have a Linux Foundation ID, it's pretty painless and it might make things easier for you to access information throughout our systems. Anybody have any questions on that? All right, let's get into the meat of the agenda today. The first thing on our action item review is the response to the Internet Architecture Board. For people just getting engaged here, the Internet Architecture Board put out a statement that spoke to risks with attestation in a way that we feel is detrimental to the interests of confidential computing. And so several TAC contributors, substantially Chris taking the pen to help coordinate all of that, have put together a response. The goal of this response is really to give Dave Thaler, who's not with us today, a formally approved statement from the CCC that he can go take to the IAB meeting that is this weekend. So my hope is that everybody's had enough chance to review this today, and that we don't need to make any substantial changes to it, and that we're able to vote it in and then get Dave equipped to go help fix this statement. Shortly before the meeting, I merged in a couple wording changes that Dave had suggested, and Yash had made a grammatical correction as well. So I think all of the feedback has been addressed.
So yeah, I left a pretty high level comment on the mailing list last week, and I don't think the current draft response is sufficiently adjusted based on that.
Okay. What sort of things were you looking for in that? And you did, by the way, get a chance to read this most recent draft. It's not changed much.
I skimmed through it. I don't know. All right. So I mean, the gist of my comment was that, let's focus on getting the IAB to recognize that, their attestation can be used in multiple places and not all of them are bad. Mm-hmm. Whereas this draft really takes a completely different direction, which has attestation is a technical mechanism, and it doesn't really matter how it's used. I think that's the wrong approach.
Okay. So I do see some verbiage here that we're asking that they support positive usages. So maybe that partly addresses your interest in helping them see that there's there's not just one way that attestation is used. I think there might be some further details here on the example benefits.
Look, I don't think you're going to convince the IAB that attestation on that client-side attestation is a good idea, right? So a letter that explains why attestation is a good idea is not going to help them, right?
Yeah, I think there's a few things in play here, including just getting them to take a very high-level statement that attestation is bad and not force a reader to understand nuance. So I don't think we necessarily need to convince them that client attestation is good as much as make sure that their statements are properly qualified so that they don't read poorly on remote attestation and uses in confidential computing. Yash, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, so me and Lily did have a chance to review the statement, and a couple of things did come up. So the beginning of the statement starts off very strong, where we ask the IAB to either withdraw or amend the statement. That seems something that I don't think the IAB will agree to. I understand they came out with a very broad brush in saying that, you know, attestation is not good in general, which we disagree with. But asking another architecture board or another committee to say, please amend your statement seems a bit of an overreach. So that was our feedback. And the other thing that I have highlighted, if you scroll down to the statement after the TUSL 2022 link, yeah, the one thoughtful approach to, so it actually says that we should separate mechanism from policy, but what both me and Lily agree on is that, you know, mechanism is policy, like the way that we work right now. A functioning mechanism is taken as policy. So we don't agree with that statement as well. I do agree a discussion needs to happen with the IAB, but the draft as it is, we don't agree with it.
Okay. So one of the little changes that was made right before the meeting was the request to withdraw was removed. So now it just says amend. And it is fairly direct in a statement, but I think that's really what we're doing. We are asking them to amend. So I don't know that it would improve things to be less direct about that.
If our end goal is actually for them to amend it, right? Like we should the whole letter should be written in such a way as such that it convinces them to amend it, right? And I think the most convincing thing we could do for them is, right, say, hey, can you please make a clear distinction between client side and server side attestation?
Okay.
I'm not entirely convinced that it's appropriate for them to completely rule out the use of client-side attestation.
I think so.
That's not up to you, right? Like that's their opinion, and I don't think we are going to change that. Right, but right now they're throwing out the kids with the bathwater because they're overgeneralizing.
Manu?
Yeah, I was going to second what Chris was saying, and I think what we are doing is we are asking that they amend. We're not requiring them. They may decline to do so, but at least we need to make a statement, a positional statement from where we stand. I, for one, very much believe that from a personal privacy and personal data security standpoint for mainstream humans, the attestation of the client has some very, very important and super interesting use cases. So I also suggest that I've contributed and I participated and I gave feedback on the letter. For those who disagree, maybe they should propose some alternate language or an alternate letter, so that we could at least talk based on, actual words, instead of, because this has been going on for several weeks now. So I think we need to either draw a line or just say, let's have an alternate view and people draft another version of it.
Yeah, so we let me talk about that process. So we have a much more time constrained situation than we normally do when we draft something, and we absolutely have to make a decision during this meeting. And so what I'd like to do is, if there are changes that will make people more comfortable with this response, feel like it improves it for the mission of the Confidential Computing Consortium, then let's try to make a few word changes. I don't think we can do substantial redrafts with the amount of time that we have. And I also want to sort of moderate what the implications of this wording is. That ultimately, Dave's going to go there and have a conversation. And what he needs is sort of to bring along a piece of paper that says, the CCC sees flaws with what you've written, and you have this consortium that you've gotten a reaction from. Now let's talk about what a better set of wording would be. I don't think we'll be able to get to exactly what the better wording will be in this meeting, but I think there's at least some good points in here that can help inform that conversation. So one of the things I heard Jethro say was bring up distinctions with the client. So I know at some point we had wording that talked about how client itself wasn't a well-defined term, that in networking situations that doesn't imply a device type like a handset. It just describes part of the connection. So I'm looking real quick to see if there's, I think that we dropped some of that, or maybe that was just on the mail list.
I don't believe it ever got into the draft. I think the philosophy of the statement as it is right now was to call out benefits independent of whether they're on the client or not, and to recognize that those benefits exist. The IAB may not agree with the use of those in client-side settings, but that doesn't mean that we have to back away from stating that those benefits exist.
No, we can state them, of course, right? But I'll reiterate again, right? If our goal is to have the IAB amend their statement, right? Let's try to find some common ground.
If I could just sort of say that I think that this is one of those truly classic tussles between fundamentally different principles that cannot be mediated with a blanket ban. There are going to be circumstances in which both sides wish to do things differently and where it may be appropriate to do that. And I think the idea here is to call for separation of policy and mechanism, or at least point out that by doing so, there is flexibility for all sides to do what they think is best, and doesn't force people into a blanket prescription. So I think that's not getting them to agree that client-side attestation is all good is maybe is not going to happen. But getting them to agree that having the mechanism and providing people with flexibility to use that mechanism, I think that is consistent with the way internet architects think, and might have been a more appropriate way for them to frame their statement.
So that might return us to the feedback that Yash and Lily had on separation of mechanism and policy. So let's take a minute just to reread this section and see if there's anything that would improve that wording.
And just a data point in the context of policy and mechanism. For instance, we are a public benefit corporation. So we actually incorporated our business with a public benefit, built into our articles of incorporation that has legal, substance. So we very much intend to use attestation mechanisms both on server and client side to enforce personal privacy, data security, personal cryptography in ways that really protect the individual. So we are, I think, an example of the combination of, policy that is governance that is driven by a public benefit and the use of a cryptographic, hardware-based mechanism to verify the integrity of the clients.
Mm-hmm. So with that added context, Yash, is there anything that you see here that mitigates your initial concerns, or is there some wording change that would help?
So I know that Chris has worked on this quite a bit. I don't want to recommend any wording changes right now. And Lily's not on the call as well. So what me and Lily agreed on before the call is that this discussion should go forward and we should submit something to the IIB, and we should follow process. But if you're going along with this statement, then me and Lily or Red Hat will not sign off on it, but we should still have the discussion. So we can work on this in the future. We can continue this discussion at the next call because she will be present at the November 16th call, but we will not sign off on the draft as it is.
Okay, so since Lily won't be joining today and we need a decision today, I'm going to ask you, as we switch to a slightly different topic in here, to think about what change would be needed so that we have your support, or whether the additional context you've heard mitigates that concern. Because I think with the number of voting members that we have on, we won't be able to move this forward without your vote. Okay. So I'll let you think about that while I turn back to Jethro. So you've had maybe a few more minutes here to think about client wording. I think you wanted to help draw a better distinction with client, or maybe to ask them to define clients. Is there any additional wording that you've considered now?
No, it's pretty difficult, right? I mean, I think yeah, the way that the statement is drafted right now, it tries to
Yeah, it's difficult to think of wording on the spot. I tell you what I'm going to do is I'll come back to the action items while you and Yash consider any additional things, and then we'll come back for a vote in a few minutes before we turn the floor over to the ILET presentation. Okay. So again, we're going to come back to the IAB thing shortly. The other document that we've been working on for much longer is the response to the US federal government on open source security. And so that was approved by the board over the weekend. So I'll be packaging that up and submitting it to the system. If you're curious, you can go to the RFI website itself, and there's a number of responses up there from other organizations. I haven't gotten all the way through those, but I think it's sort of interesting to see how other organizations have responded. And those might inform how we respond to future RFIs. We didn't spend a lot of time on the mentor discussion for Rust SPDM, but we do now have 3 projects, I think, in progress with VerTEE and the certifier framework. And there was an observation about whether or not the mentor mechanism that we have in place is really going to scale as we add more and more projects. So I'm thinking that one way to move this forward is to open up an issue on our governance repo to get some new thoughts on how we might address the sorts of problems that we were trying to solve with individual mentors in different ways. And an outcome of that could be, hey, let's stick with the mentor program that we have and let's go work a little bit harder to get volunteers to pair those projects up. But it could be an entirely different mechanism. So I'll look forward to getting people's engagement on that. Are there any immediate thoughts on the mentoring program before we leave that item? Okay. So we have a set of priorities that we were starting the last couple of meetings. Outreach has also done a good job in organizing their plan for 2024. So the action item here was for me to ask Outreach to come to our meeting. And what Kate and I decided is let's sync up one-on-one on comparing the 2 lists, and then we'll bring any outcomes of that to the next TAC meeting. Sort of an obvious overlap between the 2 committees that we have here is the interest in addressing the awareness of confidential computing. So a few people have commented over time that one of the biggest obstacles to getting companies to adopt this technology is that they're just not aware of it. So there's things that both committees can do in generating content, but we want to have sort of a well understood separation of duties so that it's not one of these situations where each committee assumes the other one is doing something and the ball gets dropped. So we'll bring an update on that in the next session. And then the last action item we had here is something that we've been carrying for, I think, a few months now, where Lily had reached out to project mentors to try to facilitate some cross-project collaboration. I think it was a survey to get their interests in getting together for something like a mentor meetup. And I think that is fully stalled unless Yash has a update on that.
So Lily's going to send the results of the survey to the TAC mailing list, and she has offered to present at one of the next 2 TAC calls. If I think she can attend the next one, so if you would like her to present her findings on the 16th, she can do that.
That sounds great.
Okay, I will let her know.
Great. Well, I'm happy to mark this as done. Okay, so Yash and Jethro, that was not a ton of time for you, but I don't know if you're ready to move on.
No, so I didn't come up with any additional wording. I did collect my thoughts a bit more since we last chatted 2 minutes ago. All right, and I don't know.
Would it be
the thing, like, the main concern I have is, like, if you go to the top, right, like, some things are called out, emphasized, that are problematic, that I don't think are problematic, right? And I'm actually not sure if I'm looking at the right doc. Oh, okay, I have to refresh. Yeah. Yeah, sorry. So all right, give me a bit more time to look at. I'll look at the drafts again.
All right.
Yeah, I discussed it with Lily, and her comment is that I would like to have it narrower in scope to talk about definition of attestation only. Otherwise, we are getting into policy, which is a very long discussion. So again, I don't want to block the statement moving forward. I understand there are only 4 voting members on the call right now, and us choosing not to vote on this will block it. We really want to have the discussion with the IIB, but me and Lily both don't agree with certain aspects of the statement as they are. Is there any way to proceed and then make recommendations later, or and I know Dave and Alec are not on the call and they agree with this, so we are in a bit of a, I don't know.
Well, that's true. I guess I do have Dave's indication over email that their vote is in support of this. So that might not be blocking if you choose to abstain.
Yes. So if Dave has, if Dave, Kafir, you and Chris are in support of this, and me and Lily can abstain, we would like it to be that way.
Okay. So let's see if we can put this behind us then and actually get through a vote here. So we don't often do the formal motioning and seconding, but I just want to make sure that there is another voting member of the TAC that is comfortable moving forward with a vote right now. So that would be Howard or Kafir.
No concerns from my side. I think we should move forward. And by the way, thank you so much, Dan and Chris, for working on the updated draft. I think, I'm trying to take the IAB's position and trying to figure out what would be their response. I think they might sort of lean into the openly accessible services. So I think we've been over-indexing on client attestation, but it's just half of the story, right? They're talking about client attestations for openly accessible services. So I think they probably going to continue the discussion and say, all right, hey, we only mean this for openly accessible services. Is this a well-defined term? Do we all agree what openly accessible services are? So anyway, this is where I am. I'm okay with the wording. I think we should move forward and at least start a conversation with them. I think we can meet mutual ground here. And just need to start a conversation.
Okay, great. Well, let's go ahead and move forward with that vote then, with the motion or second that indication is. So I will go back to our roll call list, but I guess I can remember people's names with there only being 4 of us voting on right now. So I guess we'll go from the top of the list here. So Kafir, Google's vote.
Yeah, we support. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Howard, Huawei's vote.
Yes.
Thank you. Intel votes in support of this. And then, as mentioned, Dave Thaler emailed his support of it before the meeting. And we have not had Alec join, correct? Right. And then Yash, Red Hat's vote.
We abstain from this one.
Abstain. All right. So I read that as 4 votes in favor and 1 abstaining, which I believe we consider a majority given the quorum present. All right, thanks everybody for the engagement on this. Definitely a situation where time forces us to opt for good rather than perfect. And I think this will be helpful to adjust the IAB's position in a way that more positively reflects one of the technologies we rely on. All right, on to a wholly and entirely different topic here. We have Baktuk from Samsung Research here to talk about the ILET project. I'm going to stop sharing, and that should enable you to be able to put up slides if you are ready for that. Looks like your slides are coming up. I can see those. You are still on mute from what I can tell from the Zoom interface.
Okay.
And I can hear you now.
Okay, let's get started. Hello, I'm Baktuk Jung from Samsung Research, and I'm leading the ILET project. It is my privilege to be here today to introduce the ILET project. Thank you for the opportunity. On this first slide, I have summarized the essence and the value of ILET. Now let us delve into how these statements connect with the ILET project. ILET is a project focused on enabling confidential computing on ARM devices. Specifically, our aim is to protect user privacy on end-user devices through on-device confidential computing. While current confidential computing solutions primarily focus on server-side protection, it is equally important to safeguard user data on the device they use. We have identified several motivations driving the need for user privacy protection on end-user devices. Firstly, there is an increasing number of users relying on privacy applications like private messengers, secure emails, and web browsers with privacy settings. Users desire their privacy to be protected, even from the operating systems or device vendors themselves. To cater these demands, the market offers privacy-centric operating systems like Graphene OS and Lineage OS, which provide enhanced privacy and security features. However, these Android-based operating systems cannot access the Android App Store. By integrating confidential computing with existing OS, we can meet the both privacy and rich experience requirements. Secondly, there is a mobile trend towards increased protection from the host operating system. This can be observed in the development of an Android virtualization framework. To further enhance isolation, the implementation of confidential computing is seen as the logical next step. Lastly, the user data we aim to protect is collected directly from end-user devices. With on-device confidential computing, we see numerous opportunities. Enabling CC on user devices establishes end-to-end confidential computing throughout the entire data processing path. As depicted in the left image, if we want to generate meeting minutes from the meeting recordings using generative AI in a server, confidential computing can provide a protective measure to prevent unauthorized access or manipulation of meeting recordings through the entire path. It also allows for the processing of user private data on the device using the same components previously employed on the server side without disclosing business logic. Like the example in the middle, an AI model for sentence autocomplete can be executed on the user device to reduce the latency without exposing the valuable business asset, which is the AI model and parameter in this case. Similarly, user private messages can be kept on the device while still utilizing the AI service, giving users more control over their data without involving the server. In addition, on-device CC will be a key enabler for machine-to-machine computing, allowing devices to establish trust directly without the need for server intervention like to D2D blockchain. Based on these motivations, the ILET project has been developing CC platform software for ARM CCA. The ILET platform consists of two main components, ILET RAM Management Monitor and ILET Hardware Enforced Security. ILET RMM manages confidential VMs called RAMs and operates on the application processor cores. ARM CCA has 4 CPU security states: secure, non-secure, RAM, and root. The RAM security state is where confidential computing takes place, and ILET RMM runs at exception level 2 in that RAM root. On the other hand, ILET HES runs in a secure hardware IP separate from the main application processor and handles platform measurement, generates attestation reports, and manages ceiling key functionality. Additionally, there is an SDK within the confidential VM, and it provides necessary functionalities for integrating apps or CC frameworks with the ILET platform. This diagram illustrates the ILET interactions with external components. ILET aligns with ARM CCA and implements the RAM management monitor specification defined by ARM. This alignment enables ILET to run existing software, such as Linux, in both the normal world and the RAM world, with the CCA patches provided by ARM. According to ARM's specification, the creation of RAMs and management of resources used by the RAMs are handled by the host operating system and hypervisor in the non-secure world. The RMM enforces that RAMs can execute confidentially without any information leakage. The non-secure world runs the CCA patched KVM hypervisor, and the KVM communicates with RMM through the RMM interface, which passes through the monitor in the root world before reaching the RMM. The Linux kernel running in the RAM requests memory sharing with the normal world or attestation reports through the RSA interface to the RMM. For attestation, the RMM forwards the request to the ILET HES to obtain the platform attestation and RAM attestation key. Currently, the ILET SDK supports interfacing with the VMware Certifier framework. For information about the external packages that ILET is using and the TCP of ILET, please refer to the proposal submission form. We are designing ILET with the current known security challenges in mind from the project inception, taking security measures by implementing with Rust program language and formally verifying the platform. Rust is chosen as the program language due to its ability to provide memory safety and concurrency control safety. These are crucial in preventing common software vulnerabilities like memory corruption. Using Rust also ensures for secure integration of the third-party modules into ILET RMM without compromising security. This enables customizing the CC platform for various applications such as IoT, wearables, and mobile phones. Furthermore, with well-crafted RMM interfaces, integrating ILET platform with third-party models can be accomplished with minimal changes. Looking at the history and future plans for ILET, after ARM announced the CCA architecture, we recognized the vision and the importance and started working on ILED in 2022. We made the source code public to encourage external contributions in the middle of the year, and by the end of the year, we were able to run a Linux in the RAM. At the end of the year, ARM also released the RMM specification and implementation results. To support the transparent CC operation on ARM platforms and ensure compatibility with tools and software at various layers, we have begun modifying the ILED interface to comply with the ARM's RMM spec this year. In the coming years, our plan is to develop use cases, conduct proof of concepts, and incorporate the required features into ILED platform. We also aim to conduct formal verification and make the CC platform customizable and extensible. Based on the motivations mentioned earlier, our work with ILED can also contribute to the CCC community. One major value we bring to CCC is the diversification of CC landscape. Currently, the majority of projects in this domain are focused on x86-based systems. By providing an additional open source projects, especially for ARM-based CC platforms, we bring the diversity and broaden the available options. Another value we provide is the acceleration of CC adoption. We do this by taking the use case-oriented approach. By demonstrating how CC can be utilized on ARM-based devices in a feasible manner, we showcase its potential and inspire others how to incorporate their projects. In addition, this approach brings unique improvements to the ILED CC platform as well. The third point that strengthens our value to CCC is the ability to build a customizable and extensible CC platform with a minimal change, and that aligns with CCC's mission statement. To achieve the goals of on-device CC, we build a complete software stack by collaborating with external projects. We are working with the VMware Certifier project to develop the CC framework and partnering with the SciSec Lab in Keister University to enable OS unikernel as the lightweight OS runtime inside the CCA. ILED is also using the Verizon project for the CC platform attestation use. We actively seek open collaboration from the community. Also, we welcome any advice or expressions of interest in participating in the project. Please feel free to reach out to us at any time. While not directly under the CCC project, the projects from the trusted firmware community contribute the same goal. These projects mainly contributed by ARM and written in C and focus on general and server features. ILED, on the other hand, stands as an independent implementation written in Rust, catering to user device-specific use cases. This diversity in implementation language and project focus allows for a wider range of CC platforms for different purposes. Additionally, ILED and TFRMM projects may collaborate and share the ideas based on our shared objectives. We hope to contribute to the realization of confidential computing through ILED. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening.
That was great, Boksu.
Yeah.
Thank you for making that presentation. I think if somebody's okay, I think somebody fixed their mic. Time for questions from the community. While you're thinking through how you want to phrase your question, I'll say that I don't disagree at all with the notions of how this project complements what we have in the CCC. I do want to point out the availability of other ARM-based work in the OE SDK, as well as in Project Brazen. And I see Kafir's hand up. So anyway, just awareness of those other architectures. Go ahead, Kafir.
Hi, thank you so much for the presentation. How do you think about the threat model and the fact that adversaries potentially have access, physical access to devices, to end devices? Are physical level threats in scope for on-device CC?
So this is based on the ARM CC architecture. And so physical threat we're looking at is snooping the memory, but it is protected by the architecture itself. And another thing we are considering is the known side channel attacks. But we are gathering the information and started to applying our ideas to our own architecture. So not all of the ideas are reflected into our project GitHub yet. Sinbom, do you have something to say?
Maybe that I think that was enough, but I want a bit more. I want a bit more about this. So actually, ARM has offered memory encryption that is hardware encryption that is similar to what AMD SCV does. But not yet. ARM has not yet offered the formally verified specification for memory encryption context. So Ethernet and other CCA projects don't have such memory encryption capability because of the lack of the support of memory encryption specifications. So
got it, makes sense. I think my only comment is that, when you think about on-device and on-device security, the setting is different, right? Because there could be an adversary somewhere with physical access to an on-device with a protected workload, and they could very well compromise ARM CCA. I think it's an accepted assumption that an adversary with physical access to a confidential computing framework and with sufficient time will be able to break the CC security promises, right? I think Mike has a follow-up comment.
Yeah, so I mean, I think this is probably a question really for ARM rather than the ILET group, unless ILET are putting extra protections in place. I think it kind of comes down to what the ARM model is for CCA protection against hardware-based attacks.
And as far as I know, ARM CCA is assuming also the physical attack, and the adversaries can achieve the physical devices. Even under that situation, it tries to protect leaking any information out of the device, out of the RAM word exactly.
Do we actually have anyone from ARM on the call who might be able to speak to this? I mean, it's probably a broader question anyway, really, but I'm not sure it should be a necessarily consideration in terms of whether we take the project or not, would be my thinking.
Yeah, if I may, I'm raising my hand, but I think we need to think in terms of attack surface and attack vectors. I think this is an additional layer of protection that we should not have perfected in the way of good. And there's some use cases where this is definitely a step forward in the right direction. In addition to ARM and having to ask ARM the question, it's also the way the chips themselves are manufactured and the physical protection of the chips. So it's a much broader question, and we should not
You're quite right.
say that this is worthwhile or not because there's other layers underneath it.
Yeah, I mean, this is raising the bar significantly, as
Exactly.
CC does generally. but particularly in this context, I think it's a very very welcome improvement over the state of the art. So I think it's a really interesting thing. I'm sorry I missed the early part of the presentation. I had problems with reading time, basically.
Yeah, and I think just for setting context for everybody, I think I'd like people to think of this as a technical presentation, and let's ask technical questions independent of whether or not those questions relate to adopting this project in the CCC. I think it's important that we have these more, I don't know, technical conversations about the extents of the security measures that we're helping provide. So where I've been exposed to problems with or risks that come from physical access to hardware, some things that we think about are not whether you can prevent that attack, but whether you can mitigate the implications of a successful attack. So are there things that you can do to limit the amount of loss? So I think those are worthwhile things to consider.
There's another thing I think we can think about when we're talking about physical attacks is whether there's any tamper evidence, which is possibly a bit more difficult in this context, but that's another area to think about. It's not mitigation, it's also knowledge of likelihood of attack.
That's an excellent point. I see Chris's hand is raised.
Yeah, I was going to recall that the Xbox uses a lot of confidential computing principles, even if it doesn't necessarily use some of the common implementations that we think about here. And it might be interesting to hear, how they protected, what they did to protect against physical attack. I gather it's held up pretty well. And in the ARM ecosystem, if some of the licensees choose to have packaging around their, processors, that might be sort of in existence. Pretty good job.
Yeah, I can second that. And in fact, there's I did research the Xbox security model. There's very little documentation about it, but they did, with the introduction of some defense in-depth capabilities, they basically stopped virtually all attacks on the platform. That work actually illuminated and started the work on Azure Sphere. Azure Sphere is an IoT chip that has defense in-depth that was directly inspired by the work that Microsoft did with Xbox. So I would strongly recommend, for whoever is, I guess we don't have any ARM person, but the Azure Sphere chip is ARM-based and is a multi-core ARM-based chip that has very, very interesting capabilities that are similar to confidential computing, but extend them in several ways.
So one thing different from the existing ARM architecture and between the ARM CCA, there's a memory is encrypted. So even if the adversaries physically access the device, I don't think they can access any content inside the CPU or memory.
I think the concern is that if you have long-term access to a CPU, there are some techniques that might allow you access to the keys which are used for the encryption of the memory.
I think one thing to mitigate that issue is use a technique to detect some attempt that attackers are trying to detach physical RAM or physical stuff from the SoC, from the mobile devices. So one way to, I'm not sure Galaxy Devices security focused chip is already implementing that feature or not, but that is clearly one way to prevent that from happening.
Yeah, it's something that HSMs have done forever and need to do if they're going to be heading for certain FIPS levels, of course.
Yeah, that's temporary evidence feature, right?
Yeah, and not just evidence, but also measures are put in place if tamper evidence is detected. So, Boktu, just so you know, this shows a level of interest in the project which is positive, right? Don't worry about
Yes,
this.
definitely.
This is the people are interested, so they want to ask to think a bit deeper. This is not a bad thing at all.
We're just pointing at the elephant in the room with physical access and on-device security.
I'm sorry, that was a bit faint on my end. Could you say that again?
So I was just saying that we were just talking about the elephant in the room, right? When you think about on-device security, there's physical attacks that come into play.
Yeah, I think that there's something that's a bit different here between most cloud use cases, in that generally when you're looking at cloud use cases, most of the deployments are likely to be, not always, but there's a fair chance that they're going to be sort of microservices or other distributed architectures, where you are unlikely to be able to know what physical machine is being used, or where it's going to be scheduled. B, they're probably ephemeral anyway, and C, there's actually a fair amount of physical protection of the hardware itself. Where if you're talking edge or mobile devices, none of those necessarily stand. So I think there is a slight difference in the edge and mobile use cases. I don't think that it disqualifies it at all, because as we said, we're raising the bar significantly anyhow, but I think that it is slightly different to other use cases. But I'm very willing to be argued with on this one. I think it's a very interesting topic, and I'd love to have an argument or at least a discussion about it sometime.
Yeah, it's great to be able to dig in to some technical depth in these meetings and get to explore these problems more. So we have a little bit more time for more questions if people have them. What our normal process is now that we've introduced the technical substance of the project, in the next session, we'll review the submission materials. You will find those on the mail list right now, I think from the 31st of October. So take a look at licensing and so forth, and then we'll be able in the next meeting to consider the project for adding to the consortium. Manu?
Yeah, I was just going to argue with Mike, but actually very much agree with him. And I think there's also the whole category of, so gaming is a very special case where the gamer is the attacker of the system, is the enemy, because they're trying to gain an unfair advantage. But there is the overwhelming, series of use cases for the IoT world, where the owner of the device is actually very much looking for protecting their devices and making everything right. So the vast majority of the infrastructure has owners and people who have physical access to them that are very friendly to those devices. So the attacker, the physical attack is an edge case, and protecting that vast decentralized IoT infrastructure in people's homes, I think is a massive use case that deserves this kind of security.
100%. And there's always the counter argument, which I'm never entirely convinced by, but it's kind of an interesting one, to say that if you know that there is let's say a crypto wallet, a high value target, then you're more then that is in itself something which is more likely to be stolen or otherwise compromised. But then again, there are, for those sorts of use cases, we're talking about mobile phones generally, and there are ways to do remote shutoff, and people also protect these things quite a lot, and they're more likely to protect them if they've got a crypto wallet on them. So, there's a whole bunch of forward and back arguments on here. When it comes down to it, we're raising the bar significantly. This is, generally this is a very positive development, bringing, confidential computing to the edge. It's something that we've talked about for a long time, and I'm really glad to see, an actual instantiation of this in a project just for the record, from what I've seen and what I know about ILET, and I've looked at it before, I'm generally very in favour of inclusion. I'm particularly pleased to see crossover with other projects with the CCC, which I think is a very positive thing indeed.
Great. Kafir, want to bring us home on this, and then we'll switch.
Yeah. So maybe one comment and one question. So the comment is, can we measure how much we are raising the bar here in terms of physical protections? Because this is not going to be as safe, as secure as an HSM, right? In an HSM, you can protect SRAM, you have like additional security on chip, and there's also the cost per unit, that you can have a high cost per unit for HSMs, and likely not here, not for ARM devices. So maybe I'm wrong, maybe not, but I think a question would be, can we measure how much we're improving physical security here? And the second comment is about...
Sorry.
Yeah, please.
I was going to say, I think that's going to depend very much on the use case. What hardware, what the physical protection is, where it's sited, and what you're running on it. I think it's a really interesting question. I'd love to delve into it, but it's quite complex.
Sounds good. I'm happy to continue the discussion. All right. So my second question is actually the TF RMM. I imagine this is the trusted firmware RMM. Can you please explain how Project Inlet differs from the TF RMM, or what can you do that this cannot do?
So if we're looking at the architecture, the component architecture itself is almost identical, and the one difference between the difference is that which language we are using, and which use case we are targeting. So currently TFRMM is written in C programming language, and on the other hand, ILET is using Rust language, and for the safetiness. And the second one is currently everything looks similar, but one important thing is what we are looking at. We are targeting at the end user device use cases. That means because this is the beginning of the project, there are only basic functionalities implemented, but in the future we are going to implement the use cases for the end user devices, and define the features that is necessary for the end user devices, and reflect the result back to the ILET RMM. So currently it is almost the same.
Okay, great. So I think with that, we will mark time for the next presentation. Thanks again for joining today, each of you at Samsung Research, and we will look forward to hearing from you again in the next session. TAC members, your responsibility before the next session is to review the materials that were sent to the mail list so that we can conclude this conversation in the next session. And then one last thought maybe for Mike is if you could share our regrets that our dear colleague Nathaniel at ARM wasn't available to provide their insights into this conversation.
So I didn't catch that. I caught about Nathaniel. I didn't catch everything you said. Sorry, could you say again, please?
Just if you could reflect our dismay that he was not available to join this conversation.
I'm not particularly in contact with Nathaniel these days, so I'm not necessarily the right person to do that. But
let me rephrase: as the executive director, the absence of a TAC member during a subject that is directly applicable to their company.
Okay, fine. I'm sure the LF and I will find ways to give him a nudge.
Okay, great.
Sorry,
all right, so with that, I will turn things over to Marcella, and my apologies, first of all, to Marcella, who I have asked to come and present today, and then failed to actually provide connection info. So hopefully that did not upset things too much for your ability to join today.
No. Yeah, and it seems like I wasn't even late, so
no, you were
I appreciate
not. So
that.
we established that. So Marcella joins us from Intel Labs, the research arm of Intel. And Marcella also participates extensively in the Open Source Security Foundation, OpenSSF, a peer organization to ours at the Linux Foundation. And so with that very brief intro, I will let Marcella introduce herself further and what she's here to talk about today.
Sure. So thanks, Dan, first of all, for having me today. And yeah, I'm a research scientist. I've been working in the software supply chain space for a good 3.5 years at this point. Before that, I was sort of involved more on the sort of OS security isolation side of things, working with CEs, not working with CEs, and also some applied crypto. I am on the trustworthy distributed systems team, so I also have some of my work does sort of touch on distributed systems, decentralized systems, blockchain. So that's just a bit on my background. Today I'm going to be talking about essentially steps we've taken to enable trusted execution environment in the software supply chain, both for making the processes sort of safer and also to improve the integrity of software supply chain metadata that is generated during these processes. So with that, I will share my screen. And please feel free to stop me at any point or ask me to clarify any, oh, there it is. Any points. So hopefully you can see this. I'm trying to find the slideshow button. Okay. So wait for me to minimize that. Okay. Zoom just pops open a lot of different little windows. Okay. So yeah, the overall how should I say, the overall theme or topic of this line of research is attribute-based integrity. I'll dive into what that really means, but the idea is roughly that, you know, from a bird's eye view, right, software supply chain is, grab a little laser pointer, sort of a development step, right? Someone writes some code, sends it off to a CI/CD service for building and testing, packaging, and then we deliver it to customers, and they just want to know, can we trust the software, right? Today, we establish trust in software artifacts using identities. So who did this come from? Is this, you know, at sort of a lower level, is this binary? If I hash it, is that hash the one that I expect? And for open source software, there's especially institutional and reputational trust that plays into this too. If we look at the SolarWinds hack though, right? SolarWinds hack happened in sort of 4 large stages that some of them overlapped over time, some of them did not, right? I don't know how familiar you are with the sort of details of the SolarWinds hack, but essentially there were 4 different areas that were attacked, or that were attack vectors, rather, I should say, that essentially enable these attackers to ultimately spread malware via legitimate software updates. So here, right, this was the Orion, no, this was the Orion software by the company SolarWinds, right? So their customers were still receiving legitimate looking SolarWinds updates, but ultimately this malicious update that was at some point planted during the compilation step started mimicking legitimate software behavior, but was also in the background stealing confidential company information. So really what we learn from this type of attack is that even if code is coming from reputable sources, it's not always trustworthy. And so identity becomes insufficient for sort of gaining trust, right? And so we need details about code properties. And so I come back to this question of what does it really mean to trust software? And we have things like code signatures today, who wrote the software, who built the software, right? Software supply chain metadata like FBOM, software bills of materials, and SALSA, which I can go into in a bit, start to answer some of these more complex questions about the process. And there's a whole slew of questions still that current frameworks, I'll just say, and techniques can't quite answer, right? Questions about hampering and versions of tools that were used and hardware platforms that a specific software package were built on, right? This is where the actual attributes start to come in. And hopefully you can start to see some connections with confidential compute technologies as well. So the insight that we had sort of trying to solve this problem of how can we answer this whole bottom half of questions is, can we collect an extra layer of information about code behavior before it's deployed, right? Typically, code behavior is sort of is typically analyzed once the package has been built and you sort of just like run it in a test phase. But we actually think that the software supply chain can help. So attribute-based trust is based on this idea that a lot of the information we want is already available through the supply chain because of how the artifacts are built. Examples are sort of pre-build analysis steps, runtime traces of build systems during the build process. We can even capture information like compiler flags that affect certain code properties, right? So think of your compiler stack protection flags, for example, right? As we build, can we capture this information about this flag being used and essentially make an assertion about properties that our binary is going to have at the end, right? So in this case, we can assert if this compiler flag was used and this is a legitimate version, a well-built, non-malicious version of the compiler, then our binary is going to have buffer overflow protection. So this is the type of information we wanted to be able to capture about software. Any questions so far?
One question. I do understand everything that you said so far, but I'm trying to look at the SolarWinds attack, and because people had access, they got the credentials, they managed to change the code, and so all of those measurements would still be taken, but how it would it be protect against that new malicious code that was injected?
So yeah, that's a really good question. And as you said, this per se does not protect against the credential stealing. But what this can do is, as the customer, you can essentially express expectations in this same form as well, right? Where if your expectation is that your binary doesn't have buffer overflow protection, you can hopefully, I mean, first of all, check to see how it was built. You're right that once that build process is compromised, it becomes a bit more difficult to trust the assertions coming out of the process. And so that's actually where confidential computing technologies can help. So I'll say there's sort of two parts to a two-part answer to your question, right? This alone, you're right, does not actually prevent that. And so as I will talk about later, I'm working on some frameworks and standards for bringing TEs into the build process so that the process itself becomes much more difficult to be subverted in that way. So hopefully that answers your question.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll jump in for. I think it's true that this doesn't solve the problem of, is there sour milk? But that's not really the issue here, right? When I'm trying to get from a traditionally trusted source, right? Then once you purchase the milk, is it not sour? So I think this is really good.
Thank you. Yeah, that's absolutely right. This is really supposed to complement that information about origin, and yeah, sort of, answer those additional questions really, about what's going on.
If I can add, a little bit of input here, we actually are very interested in this problem, so I'd love to connect with you, Marcella, after that.
Okay. Yeah.
But one element of answer to our fear is that you should build your identity system in a confidential computing environment itself. So you do the chaining all the way, to the individual human. In fact, we are advocating for a universal name system that has humans, organizations, digital things and physical things within the same name base, so that then you can have universal zero trust across all these entities. You chain the entities across a network of TEs. So anyway, we can. I'd love to talk to you about that offline, Marcella.
Yeah, absolutely. Just quick counter question to your comment. So are you involved with the SCIT project at all, or that's in the IETF?
Yeah, I'm going to the IETF meeting this week, and I just sent an email to SCIT and to Whimsy and to the Identity Discuss and all that to present the work that we're just, we are very early stage. We're just coming out with this infrastructure. So we are presenting it to people gradually, step by step. But I will be at IETF next week and meeting with the SCIT folks. Yes.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I'm glad that the dots are being connected, because sometimes many of these different groups don't know who to talk to. So I'm glad that you've been able to.
And it's not just that, I don't know if you can see, but CISA has this request for comments on the way to identify software. So CISA themselves are basically trying to figure out how those things connect. And, you can't connect the dots unless you actually can connect the dots in confidential computing ways and with cryptographic chaining. So it's a very, very interesting problem.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. So the framework that we essentially developed to make this model, this concept happen, is the Supply Chain Attribute Integrity Framework, or SCI. It's essentially a data format for asserting attributes and integrity information about software artifacts, and the compute sec that produced them. So it was important for us to be able to capture a variety of different types of attribute information with this data format. So as I said, it's supposed to be kind of general purpose. We're trying to make evidence for these claims a first-class primitive. And so again, this is sort of a forward reference to the PE-based or confidential compute-based processes that we wanted to enable, that really use those hardware attestations as evidence for some of these claims, and ensure, of course, that it's interoperable with the existing sort of industry standard frameworks for software supply chain that are out there.
So, quick question on that, if I may. Sorry. How do you relate to InToto, which I know is trying to provide some of the framework around this?
Yeah, I will get to that in a few slides.
Okay, sorry, I'll leave you to get to it then.
But yeah, I'm one of the sort of core InToto attestation framework maintainers. So there's a pretty strong connection between this and InToto. Absolutely.
Perfect.
Yeah. I'm going to skip over this slide since I do want.
I actually have a question. This is Mark Novak. So I want to sort of place what you're saying in a context of something that a lot of people on this call probably don't deal with, fortunately for you. But regulated institutions deal a lot with this whole concept of information and technology asset management. And this is where regulators require that you keep track of your computing fleet out there. So technology would be compute, storage, network, etc., and information would be, the data that is stored. So this comment is about technology clearly, because you're talking about properties of software packages and whatnot. So normally, the way this is done is when there is a software package or module that is deployed, it is normally associated with some kind of pipeline ID. What I mean by pipeline is effectively like CI/CD mechanisms that were in place to put this thing into production. Now, the number of attributes available directly when you look at the package tends to be small. So you might be able to see the pipeline ID, and that will refer you to another concept called the system of record, and that is a strongly governed store of the kinds of things that you can then glean from the pipeline ID, right? So the process might be, I push a package into production. There is a pipeline that is created for that process, and everything that happened as part of that process, approvals, compiler flags, versions of compilers, bills of materials, all of that basically goes and lives in the system of record. I guess my point is all the information you're talking about here is clearly available and stored, but it's not stored on the package itself. It's available through a level of indirection. I just want to make sure that folks on the call understand that when, say, an attestation service goes and examines properties of a package for purposes of attestation, it's going to involve some bespoke mechanism that an enterprise puts into place to go and fetch all that data. It's good to have standards around it, for sure, like it is for bills of materials and everything else. Just normally do not expect that you will find fine-grained information on the package itself.
Yeah, that's an incredibly good point. It's and right, this isn't being used in a very widespread way yet, right? But yeah, it's absolutely true that most of the software supply chain metadata, even SBOM, tends to be sort of disjoint from the software artifact that they're referring to. And so it's important to us to be able to somehow strongly bind the information about a package back to the package. And I think that also comes back to the identity question of how do we identify packages uniquely and all that. And so at least from the open source software side, some folks are coming up with I'll just say attestation data stores or metadata data stores. But yeah, the data storage problem is absolutely there, because I think storing ideally would be great to store a lot of this information with the package itself. I think the only ecosystem, there's two ecosystems for doing this now. NPM has started to store some level of metadata with NPM packages. And I believe OCI for containers is starting to enable some of this tighter binding, but we still need to trust those, right? Those bindings.
I want to stress the fact that the path to deciding where something is good or not can take many shapes. So in case, for instance, so say we are testing a package that we're finding in production, we're trying to decide on whether to allow some sort of form access, right? One path might be, oh, this is a package our developers developed, and we have some rules in place to make sure that perhaps we have no unpatched vulnerabilities older than 2 weeks. It's our custom bespoke policy. In other cases, we will actually find that a vendor has deployed a package in our system. Like it's actually possible in the cloud, for instance, for a vendor to go and deploy software in your account. And the acceptance path might be, well, we have a service agreement with them, And we'll just make sure that this package was deployed within the last 2 weeks by an approved vendor. We're not going to look deeper inside whatever, because their mechanisms might be different from ours. So the point is, none of the things you're describing here are likely to be used directly by the attestation service. They'll probably be evaluated in a lot of cases through a level of indirection of some sort, and you can't really predict what that's going to be.
Yeah.
So, just a word, we definitely need to talk, Marcela, because we actually have a mechanism that binds all artifacts, all other related data cryptographically with the digital object itself. So the software source, executable, and all that stuff. So I'm not an expert in this space, but I'm very interested to discover that there's a gap in the current solutions today, and that both of you, Mark and Marcela, you're basically expressing the fact that there is this level of indirection that we essentially collapse. We can cryptographically unite, a digital artifact, an identifier, and any other bits of data with that thing in a cryptographically and universally assured way for provenance, integrity, and confidentiality of all of it. And all of this is thanks to confidential computing. We could not do it any other way. So let's talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I will move on. This is the data format, but I want to get to the authenticity part of the supply chain metadata. So this starts to get to the questions of, actually trusting the information that we're putting out there, right? It's not enough to have this information out there. So this is where Entoto comes in. I think, Mike, you had asked about this, right? This is a CNCF project. The goal is to generate authenticated claims about the software supply chain. And this can be both for sort of regulatory compliance and incident response internally, and honestly also just sort of more localized operations like admissions control and dependency consumption and all that. It's important to be able to verify. So we have integrated Sky into the Entoto specification so that we can have a standard format for claims about the software supply chain. And so this is roughly the Entoto model. There are several layers. We have the envelope layer on the outside, which actually carries the signature. Internally, we have a statement layer, which actually contains the specific claims and a subject. And here we're sort of showing an SBOM, an SPDX SBOM inside of an Entoto statement. So we have the predicate and the subject. The subject in this case being some kind of container, for example, or some kind of other binary that can be identified. Or the integrity can be sort of checked with the SHA-256 hash. So this is really the format for a single claim or a single software attestation. But Entoto also provides essentially a framework for defining, predefining different steps in your supply chain. So a software vendor would essentially generate what is called an Entoto layout, which describes a policy for your supply chain and really as it's called, the expected layout and the expected steps, participants, and all of that. And then at the end of each step, you would expect a specific envelope or a specific bundle even of these envelopes with different claims to be generated and handed off to the customer. And so here's really how Sky fits into the broader Entoto framework, right? Entoto specifies these outer layers of the format, really, of the claims and attestations format. And there are different predicates. So right before in that model image, I showed an SPDX predicate. This is what it would look like with a Sky predicate with attributes, right? So here The claim might be, you know, my SDX builder is some, how should I say, TE-ified build tool that is running inside of a valid enclave. And so our actual enclave binary might be here, and the evidence might be our SDX attestation. So hopefully that answers the question. But again, as I mentioned before, right, we also want integrity for the process and the metadata. So this is where confidential computing and TEEs can come in, right? Can we lock down this entire block of the supply chain essentially inside of a TEE? And so that's been the focus of my work more recently, is essentially taking the sort of foundation that we built with Sky to be able to express attributes and property information about a supply chain and binaries and sort of everything in between, using CE attestations as evidence. So this is where work that I've been doing through the OpenSSF or the Open Source Security Foundation has come in and has been focused on what we're calling build environment attestations. And the goal here is to attest to the integrity of the various layers of build environments and their software stack. So this image here on the bottom right is our current sort of build platform or build service model. You have your compute platform that underlies everything. So this would be your, in a cloud hosted environment, right? This bottom half would be provided by, say, an Azure or an AWS. This top half would be your CI/CD system, like GitHub Actions or GitLab CI, I think. And so all of these components on this top half are provided by the CI/CD service. And there's an extra line for the tenant here because the user of these services, right, they provide the actual build definition and have visibility into some of these layers and components, but not all of them. That's what this is showing. And we'd like to be able to attest to the integrity of these various components and layers. And so we've teamed up with GitHub through the OpenSSF to essentially solve this problem of making TEs available and useful to this type of model.
So I have a question on that. I think two things related to the same topic. Firstly, there's a component that I don't see, which maybe is implicit, which is an attestation service. And secondly, you're using the word attest, and I'm not sure you're using it in the confidential computing standard usage, where we have I think they should be combined. What you're talking about here, the attestation should be signed. Yeah, okay. I'm going to be a bit careful. I think we need to be using CC attestation alongside any other assertions, shall we say, to make a broader one. But I'd love to see that in the picture as well, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah. So the idea is for this to be to have TEs be the foundation of these attestations. So when I say attest in this case, I actually do mean hardware attestations. But you're right, it's a bit implicit in this hardware platform layer over here. Any sort of external services are currently
well, that's the thing, right? You need to have a remote attestation service, which is not owned by the compute platform, to be making the attestations, which you can then put in at the level of the build platform, so that you can actually build these things in and make statements. I think.
But that's a very good point,
actually. On the same page, but it'd be nice to see it explicitly. That's all.
Yeah. No, that's a very good point, actually. We've been gathering feedback on this model, and I think there's sort of a before hardware attestation and after adding hardware attested capabilities to build environments that has these additional components that are not in here. So it would be very useful to call that out explicitly. Was there another question or comment?
Yeah, I saw Sal's hand go up earlier, and again now, and then probably Manu after that.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I I think the point was kind of made, but I think the overall goal of this, it'll fall short right now with the current model of supply chain, but it doesn't have to. And I think that's really the point that was made. Right now, it is really concerning because I can't control if the milk is sour before it gets into the TEE. But if every software that I'm bringing in, every open source project is tied to a TEE, then in that case, I know for a fact that it comes securely and is given securely and remains secure. That is really interesting. So that's all I gotta say because it was already covered.
Thank you. I'm glad that I'm able to articulate that clearly, though. And yeah, I imagined that at least this audience was will have already bought into the use of TEs for this use case. Really,
I spoke on exactly the use of TEs in supply chain at Bilbao for the OSS thing. This is very much on point. I'm very pleased.
Yeah, and I should also say that. Sorry, Dan, you were going to say something.
I was just going to point out we're down to about 5 minutes. I see Manu has a question or comment, but I also want to make sure that Marcella can get through the content that she wants to get through.
It's going to be quick. We actually are trying to build this, for ourselves right now. So our infrastructure has a, TE-based identity management for people. We push our source code, we compile it, we sign it within our own infrastructure. The one thing that we are struggling with is the compilers in TEs, the scalability and performance of all that. Have you guys built this on TDX? Are you building that with TDX or with SGX? What are you using?
I have used Grameen to run GCC in SGX, but it works sort of for local builds. When I tried to run a GitHub Actions runner inside of Grameen specifically, so my experience is only limited to Grameen. There were some issues with running sort of a full CI/CD workflow in that particular way. It might have been configuration issues on my part, but what we, and maybe I can sort of jump ahead. What we are essentially aiming for is more something like TDX or SEV, sort of the way VM-based TE, simply for the reasons you were saying, that it's much more scalable. And honestly, if you look at this model, right, it fits the current cloud-hosted model especially a lot better than SGX, right, where you would have to put all these pieces into an enclave. I'm not exactly sure how that would be distributed. Would you need multiple SGX enclaves to sort of reproduce this build image? It's not entirely clear to me. So both I think from an implementation and model standpoint, TDX and even SEV and again, just the VM granular confidential compute technologies, I think are more where we're headed, I'll just say. And so I think this is okay, yeah. 2 more slides, and I don't want to go into all of the details here, but the work that we're currently doing with GitHub is essentially to standardize sort of implementation requirements and rep models around implementing T-enabled builds. And the reason why we have these different levels is really just to show the sort of incremental work that can be done to provide additional integrity for the build platform itself. So as Sal was saying, right, if we can provide these integrity guarantees for the platform, then we can have much stronger assurances that the build process itself was not compromised. Or if it was compromised, we can detect it after the fact as well, right? So we do actually want to be able to capture provenance of the build images themselves. This would be done via sort of software claims and assertions. Here, right, the root of trust would still be the build platform that is putting out these sort of, I'll just say, quote unquote, attested build images, but that would be sort of a first sort of foundational step. And then sort of incrementally, we can reduce our TCB essentially to the compute platform if we run our build images on secure boot and vTPM enabled platforms. This prevents sort of tampering with build image kernels and sort of these lower level layers of build image software. And once we want to actually start providing guarantees or properties, right, that prevent some of this tampering or make it detectable past those lower software levels, right? We can run our build image on runtime measured hardware. So this really is TDX. This could be implemented with TPMs, but we are sort of leaning very heavily towards TDX because of the remote attestation capabilities. And at this point, right, the TCB has been reduced down to the hardware platform. So hopefully you can see these are the types of requirements that will hopefully become part of the OpenSSF SALSA spec. And we have a proposal in flight. We're still sort of gathering feedback and incorporating that into our proposal. But again, like I said, we want to essentially have a standard set of integrity requirements for build platforms and compute platforms, if we can sort of add that extra layer. Yeah, so I'll sort of end here. We're finalizing the requirements really, and again, bringing this back to Intoto and the Sky framework that I showed earlier. We're exploring how software attestation can expose these TE attestations to the software level consumers. So with
That's
that,
great.
we're out of time, but yeah.
Dan, may I ask you to put Marcella and Kate George in touch so that Marcella can look at applying to speak at a number of the conferences that we're involved with, because I know that people would be very interested in a session on this topic. So that would be really cool.
Yes, absolutely. And just for your awareness, Marcella, there's a lot of supportive conversation going in the chat. I think there's interest in hearing about this again in a CCC meeting. We'll probably also think about whether we carry some aspect of this as a topic area for the TAC in the coming year. And I know we're slightly over time here. If there's anything that anybody in the CCC community can do to help forward, I think the first bullet that you had on the last slide was updating the SALSA definitions.
Yes.
If there's voices that can come in from here that would be helpful, that might be a good call to action for us as well.
Yeah. Yes, and I should say the SALSA community has been very receptive to these proposed requirements. We're not part of where we currently are in those conversations is figuring out sort of where in the spec and all of that this line of work fits, because it is very it is currently very tailored and specific to CI/CD platforms. There are some folks in the community who would like to see sort of broader use of CEs for other types of software supply chain components, like source control, but it is a good question. We haven't fully understood the sort of threat model that those people are trying to address. We think there's a much clearer sort of threat model for CI/CD and build. So that's where we're focusing right now.
Great. Well, if you want to request support from anybody, you know how to reach me. Otherwise, feel free to hit the TAC mail list here at the CCC. Ben is asking that you share a link to the slides so that that can be posted with the minutes. And Manu is asking about connecting at IATF next week, whether you'll be there.
I will not be there because I will be at KubeCon talking about some of this.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know, Dan, if you've shared my contact information, but yeah, definitely feel free to share my email as well.
Okay. All right, I'm going to sign you up for some credit card offers too.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thanks again for presenting. We're over time, so we'll let people move on with our next meeting, but I think this is really productive TAC meeting today. So thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much.